Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, stories from around the military and defense worlds. We've got updates from industry leaders, top officials, and experts around the armed forces. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
So I wanted to start by quoting the opening of a piece co-authored by Dr. Matysek at the Foreign Policy Research Institute earlier this year that really outlines well the scope of the challenge we're facing pretty sharply. It says, on April 10th, after coalition forces had fired at least 1,700 Patriots in just 5 weeks, the Pentagon announced a $4.76 billion contract to accelerate production. While a seemingly forceful response, the move only highlighted the core problem. At the current build rate of 600 missiles per year, it would take 3 years to replace what was used in a little over a month. Replenishment runs on an industrial clock, and that clock is measured in years, not days. And if you've been following the tallies over at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, you know that it's not just Patriot missiles we're talking about. As of April, stockpiles across key munitions were depleted anywhere from 30 to 80%. So the article that I quoted from proposes a 3-part solution to dig out of the crisis. You buy time through dependable multi-year production contracts, by redundancy and subordinate production pipelines to reduce bottlenecks, and by efficiency to get away from overkill and overuse of these exquisite systems. So I wanted to kick off by asking, for each of you, which of these pieces would you prioritize as most pressing and urgent, and why? And if there's a fourth proposal that you'd put over the top of all of these, feel free to make the case for that as well. Let's go ahead and start with Dr. Matysek for this one.
Thanks for bringing that up. So the reason why I think this is really important to discuss is because we kind of took production for granted, and especially like the supply chains for like the minerals and the parts. And unfortunately, due to Chinese export controls on various types of minerals, it's becoming more difficult for American companies to source the minerals and parts needed to actually make these weapon systems. And then you combine that with all of the requirements and processes and safety that is required to make every aspect of any type of missile. It becomes a very difficult compounding process. It becomes more and more expensive. And, you know, it's easy in the short term to make these announcements about buying more, but it was sort of, you know, too little too late. And now the entire defense industrial base, not just in the United States, but like across the West, is really having to play catch up in a way that is very uncomfortable, not to mention, again, the difficulties have been imposed by China in terms of trying to source a lot of these important minerals, like gallium, for example, which China basically controls 100% of the world supply of that. That's important for actuators, for radars, and other sort of components of any type of missile. And so that's why it is actually really important you guys have put together this panel and discussion about this, is because you're going to hear more and more announcements. I can guarantee you that of companies in the United States and across the West that are going to say, you know, they got a big purchase order or some guaranteed funding. And while that sounds great, it's still too little too late. And so a lot of companies now are, at least from my perspective, seem to be trying to find innovative and cheaper ways to produce any type of interceptor. And it isn't just going to be Patriot missiles. There's going to be a host of different types of systems, from actual missiles to lasers and microwave guns, to try and create a better type of layered air defense, because it is sort of unsustainable firing multi-million-dollar missiles multiple times against one missile, say from Iran, that costs $500,000 or less, and not to mention all the cheap $30,000 Shahed drones. So again, this is a really important discussion that we're having today.
Kudos to Dr. Marasek for writing the paper, having the courage to kind of raise this up for public awareness. I think it's an important topic, and I think happy to be on this with you and my colleagues here to share the stage. I think if you look at the three things that he highlighted in his paper, the stability afforded by a multi-year procurement contract is probably the most important thing for Lockheed Martin, right? Because we can basically scale and produce today. We're willing to invest. Our CEO has gone on record to say we've invested or plan to invest by 2030 between $8 to $9 billion, in the defense industrial base and all the suppliers that support things like the critical munitions that you're hearing about in the press. PAC-3 MSC is the most capable air defense effector on the planet. We're happy to provide that. There's talk about the proper weapons target pairing. That's absolutely critical, right? You shouldn't be shooting a PAC-3 MSC at a drone, but if that's all you have and that drone has an effect and it's going against a critical asset, it's well worth the price to shoot the PAC-3 MSC at the drone to defend what matters most. That said, Lockheed has looked, as well as others in the industry, at cheaper effectors. So, you need the PAC-3 to shoot down highly capable, highly maneuvering, ballistic and hypersonic threats. So you can't have a lower cost effector going against a highly capable threat. Conversely, if you shoot all your highly capable effectors against low cost threats, you have the risk of running out of them or not having them when you need them. So I do think that having a multi-year procurement is a great first step, and then having things like redundancy in supply and efficiencies that we're going to gain by the increased volumes, all of those will fall out. But I think first step is, having a good forecast of what you need, flowing that to the prime and then to the various subs. And then, the competition is good for everybody. We're happy to compete with other providers and so that the US government, as well as the partners and allies around the world, can get the best price for the most capable effector that they can.
Thank you. Let's go next to Jason Meredith and then Jeff after that.
Thank you, Hope. It's great to be with you here today, and appreciate the opportunity to talk with my distinguished colleagues on this panel. I do want to follow up on your question of what's the, I'll say, highest priority element of what Dr. Matysek said in his paper there. For me, it's a little bit hard to say that there's one priority over another, because I think they all work hand in hand and are really need to be worked in parallel. I do agree with what Jason said just a moment ago, that multi-year deals are very, very important. But I think if we look back and use a little bit of the lens of history to see where we have gotten, how we have gotten to this place, decades ago, 3-4 decades ago, we had many, many suppliers, not only at the prime level, but also at the subcomponent provider level, that provided us that resiliency. And over a time of relative, I know this sounds a little bit hard for those of us that went through 9/11 and the war on terror, global war on terror, but relatively peaceful time from a standpoint of firing large weapon systems. But the demand for missile systems in general was very, very low. And so as a government, we decided to reduce the number of, allow the reduction of the number of suppliers at multiple levels. And that demand in just a free market scenario reduced the amount of supply that was there to support the demand. And so what we now see, as has been mentioned by several of my colleagues, is that the demand has risen again very, very rapidly. And so industry is looking forward to investing. There's a lot of investment that's happening to try and bring back additional capacity at the current suppliers, such as Lockheed and Boeing and others. But it's also incentivizing other companies to come forward to provide additional resiliency.
We've got more news coming up after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. Here's more of our latest coverage.
President Donald Trump on Sunday instructed the Pentagon to, quote, substantially reduce joint military exercises with South Korea, citing the cost of the drills and Seoul's refusal to take part in actions against Iran. Hours before exercises were scheduled to begin, Trump said on his Truth Social site he was, quote, not happy that the U.S. had agreed to participate in the exercise, and highlighted his relationship with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. These exercises are not only costly, but send a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile to a country that, as long as Donald J. Trump has been president, has been unthreatening and respectful, Trump wrote. The annual joint military exercises are scheduled to run until August 27th, with about 18,000 South Korean military personnel participating. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff told Reuters the drills started on Monday as scheduled. The U.S. Army is issuing a call to ramp up production of ground-launched rockets. The service sent out a request this week for 133,014 guided multiple launch rocket system rockets by 2034, according to the Army's sources sought notice. Contractors have until September 1st to submit white papers on plans to meet that quota. The timeline calls for churning out 19,002 rockets per year from 2028 to 2034, with the first actual deliveries starting in February 2030, and comes amid questions about the depth of U.S. munitions stockpiles. Current GMLRS manufacturer Lockheed Martin announced last year that it is ramping up production capacity to 14,000 rockets annually. The Army's new plan would require a nearly 36% increase in capacity on top of that. GMLRS rockets are launched from the M270 multiple launch rocket system armored vehicle. The munitions can also be fired from the smaller truck-mounted M142 high mobility artillery rocket system, or HIMARS. The base version of GMLRS has a range of 70 kilometers, while the extended range version can reach up to 150 kilometers. China's Unitree Robotics, the world's biggest producer of humanoid and canine robots, based designs for its most successful four-legged machines on innovations funded by the U.S. military, according to 3 top robotics researchers and a former U.S. defense official. The Chinese company's $1,600 Go-2 model, launched in 2023, helped the company rapidly dominate the global quadruped robot market. The firm's imminent Shanghai stock market debut has drawn frenzied demand. The success of these robots draws on breakthroughs in quadruped movement, financed by the U.S. Army Research Laboratory and other military programs, the researchers and the former official told Reuters.
That core technology is at the heart of all of the Chinese-legged robots that I've actually seen be successful to date. It's a completely different paradigm that we were a part of developing as part of our academic careers. There were papers published, and then these papers were very closely studied by Chinese companies like Unitree, and these principles were put to work and then scaled in an exceptional way using amazing manufacturing and supply chain technology, to where now you see companies like Unitree and other companies in China are shipping way more legged robots than American companies are.
I think the biggest factor in China's advantage for developing its robotics industry is its massive industrial base. Its vast ecosystem of manufacturing, factories, and things that provide both kind of demand side support for its robotics industry, as well as cheap access to all the components it needs to manufacture those. And I think the military side of the robotics ecosystem really is kind of riding on the benefits of that much broader commercial ecosystem. And when I look at where the U.S. has fallen behind, I see that loss and hollowing out of the manufacturing sector as being a really big driver of why the kind of corresponding national security applications have fallen behind as well.
The episode underscores broader problems with the United States' ability to compete with China's state-directed manufacturing sector in high-tech strategic industries, including those critical to national security. Backed by subsidies, Chinese companies have seized market share across industries such as solar panels, drones, EVs, and quantum communications, many of which were first developed in the US with government or military backing.
There's no way we're going to do this completely on our own as the U.S. We need to work closely with our allies. In particular, at Ghost, we work very closely with companies in Korea and Taiwan and Japan, where they have some of this manufacturing and supply chain expertise. So there's absolutely no path forward without them. I do think that we also have to have strategic ability to source these products strategically in the U.S. as well. So I think some amount of strategic supply is going to be critical as well, and then the ability to service these products.
In June, the Pentagon added Unitree to a list of Chinese military companies, calling it a, quote, contributor to the Chinese defense industrial base. That designation falls short of a sanction, but limits the U.S. military's future use of Unitree's technology. The PLA did not respond to a comment request. NATO forces held major exercises in Romania recently, practicing to fend off an invasion on the alliance's eastern flank. Over 1,000 troops from across Europe and led by France took part in the Eagle Spearhead exercises in Transylvania. The forces tested their ability to fight off a large-scale attack on the country, which borders Ukraine. The exercise comes as other nations on NATO's eastern flank warn that Russia could launch a limited attack on the alliance. The Kremlin says warnings of such attacks are unfounded.
So this exercise is the main exercise of our rotation. It is called Eagle Spearhead. It is an exercise involving all the battleground, which is approximately 1,300 soldiers from different countries.
Ça va, ouais. Horloge.
This exercise involved multiple level 4 battle groups. We did a tactical situation for the battle group with enemy coming from the south and the east, which was supposed to take the region of Chinku, and our battle group regrouped with also Romanian and Italians were supposed to stop this battle group. So the main battle was happening in Chinku.
When we come back, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union returns with her latest tips. Don't go away. Welcome back. In this episode of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with her latest tips. Have a look.
Leasing a car is really attractive at first glance, especially when the monthly payment is lower than buying. But the real cost of leasing goes beyond that number. The upfront fees can be more than you bargained for in some cases, to the tune of $1,000 or more, since it can include the first month's payment, taxes, registration fees, a security deposit, and dealer fees. Then there are monthly costs to plan for, like insurance, gas, and maintenance. Plus, full coverage insurance is often a requirement, which can add to your budget. And when the lease ends, there may be more fees waiting. You could owe a disposition fee, excess mileage charges, or wear and tear costs if the car has more damage than expected. Ending your lease early can also be costly. One more important thing to remember, when you lease, you don't own the car. That means your payments aren't building equity. Leasing may help lower your monthly payment, but it's important to look at the total cost, upfront, monthly, and at the end, before you sign on the dotted line.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, head over to militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most up-to-date service member or veteran, sign up for our Early Bird Brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent news. Finally, if social media is where you collect your open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And we're also on TikTok, so go follow us there. When we return, more stories from Defense News Weekly.
The military and defense market is constantly evolving. Stay on top of the latest news with Sightline Media Group's live events. Continue to learn, understand new tools and technologies.
We're live. You're on in 3.
Defense, government, and industry leaders come together for successful and proven engaging events. You'll gain valuable insight, get the chance to ask questions, all from the comfort of your own home or office. Sign up for our events newsletters and receive alerts for upcoming live streams.
Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. Here's more from around the military and defense worlds.
Welcome to Defense Dollars, your update on the defense and aerospace markets around the world and what's making the numbers move. Let's dive right in. First up, the U.S. Department of War is putting big money behind a major push to accelerate missile production. The department has awarded Raytheon and RTX Business a $22.9 billion contract through the U.S. Navy to speed up production of the Tomahawk, a critical long-range strike weapon. Officials say the award is designed to expand manufacturing capacity, strengthen supply chains, and reduce the time it takes to get weapons into the hands of U.S. forces. The deal also gives RTX the stability to expand its workforce and increase manufacturing throughput as the Pentagon looks to rebuild the munitions industrial base. The massive investment puts Tomahawk production at the center of Washington's broader effort to rapidly scale up critical weapons. Meanwhile, a major leadership shakeup is rocking defense contractor L3Harris. The company has parted ways with chairman and CEO Christopher Kubasik after a board investigation found conduct that violated the company's code of conduct. L3Harris did not disclose the specific nature of the conduct, but said it was not related to financial reporting, internal controls, customer relationships, or operational performance. Sam Mehta has been named president and CEO, while Louis Hay III will serve as board chairman. L3Harris maintained its 2026 financial forecast following the change, but shares fell more than 3% as investors reacted to the unexpected transition. And finally, German defense startup Helsing is turning to a surprising partner to help break into Japan's growing military market. The drone maker has enlisted Japanese e-commerce and finance giant Rakuten to help finalize a deal to sell its unmanned systems to Japan's ground self-defense forces. Japan is currently testing Helsing's HX-2 strike drone, with field tests expected to run through the end of September, as Tokyo modernizes its military amid rising concerns about China. Rakuten has limited experience in defense, but says it wants to help more startups navigate Japan's complex procurement system and connect new technologies with government agencies. The partnership comes as Japan's increased military spending and easier arms export rules draw a growing number of foreign defense companies to the market. And that wraps up your Defense Dollars for this week. Join us daily on Cheddar and Defense News for more stories like these.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. We'll see you next week.